right. Let's get started tonight, shall we? And I'm going to ask Brother Kurt to open us up.
Thank you, Heavenly Father, for this night, and thank you for letting us all be here tonight. I ask that you bless this service. In Jesus' name I pray.
Amen. All right. We may get out a little bit earlier tonight. I don't think anybody would complain about that, but it's because I want to go through the next two, the third and the fourth trumpet, before we get into going into the fifth trumpet, because as we saw, we talked about before, the first four trumpets are against the earth. And so I want to talk about those. So before we get into the other ones, I want to do those, and then have the other three trumpets next week that we can just go into and get all of those done at one time. So we may not, like I said, we may get out a little bit earlier tonight. Besides that, Levon has brought me another baby to take home, so it's sitting in my office, and I've got it may not want to sit there forever, so it's got to take it home and introduce it to all the rest of the babies. Yeah, I'm gonna hear hissing and meowing tonight. So, and it was a hot day today. I tell you, it was warm. Yeah. But I started out. I went out to play golf a little while today. I had all my studying done for tonight, and I went out to play golf a little while. Started out about 9:30, about 10 o'clock this morning. It was only about 80 degrees. By the time I got done about 2:30, and it was 102. So it got hot today. All right, 7 trumpets. We were working on the 7 trumpets. Let's review just a little bit, all right? If you remember, we talked about 2 of the trumpets. They've already sounded, all right? The first trumpet, what happened during the first trumpet? Anybody remember? Huh? That was second trumpet. First trumpet? Yeah, a third of the earth, a third of the world was on fire. Yeah, a third of the world was on fire because of the first trumpet being sounded. And as we look, we're just about at that point right now. We've got about a third of the world on fire right now. So, yeah, it's getting pretty close. So this trumpet, as we saw, the first trumpet is sounding right now. It's going on. As we said before, a lot of people think that all the trumpets happen after the rapture, but they don't. Okay? A lot of these judgments are going to happen before the rapture even occurs, in order to bring people to God and to help bring people to God. All right, the second trumpet, y'all already said that it was the mountain falling into the sea, and it caused a third of the sea to turn to blood. Now, we looked at that, and as we were talking about last week, most likely, what was the great mountain falling into the sea? A volcano of some sort. Yeah. The sea turning to blood is red algae. Yeah. So, yeah, it's the Crimson Tide. Yeah, it's and don't mean Alabama, but these are things that, again, some of these things that we look at may be kind of, you can look at them as literal, and they are occurrences that are going to happen. But we have to look at them that John didn't know these things as he was writing them down. We have to remember that. John had to just say what he was seeing based on what he knew. John didn't know anything about red algae. John didn't know anything about volcanoes. And since he didn't know about any of this stuff, he had to use the best description that he could use on it. So that was a mountain falling into the ocean or falling into the sea, and that the sea turning into blood. But we saw last week the red algae that made the sea look like blood. By the way, that was probably when it happened in Egypt. That was probably what it was. Yeah. Turn the Nile into blood. That was probably what it was. Oh well, yeah. You can't. The red algae is very toxic. You don't want to scoop up a big handful of that stuff and drink it. All right. So now we're getting into the third angel, and let's look at Revelation chapter 8, verses 10 and 11. Now, first we're going to start off here with verse number 10. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of water. Now, there's a couple of things that we want to look at here first. All right? Great star from heaven. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But the first thing we want to see is the first word in this verse, and. All right? And. Seems like we don't think anything of it. It's a conjunction, and it brings two things together, right? It's on and on, right? And that's exactly what we're going to look at. Yeah. That's what we're going to look at, exactly. The Greek word for and here is kahi. And it means and, even, also. Right? So what this shows is that the trumpets may not be necessarily sequential. We tend to think of it when the trumpets sound, there's going to be one trumpet sounds, then there's going to be a period of time, and then the next trumpet's going to sound, and then there's going to be another period of time, then the next trumpet's going to sound, or the trumpets are going to sound one right after the other, right after the other, right after the other. The and is saying also. So, yeah, so they may not be sequential. They could be going on simultaneously. They could be happening at the same time. So this trumpet is sounding, the third or the second trumpet is sounding, and now and before that gets done, and the third trumpet starts to sound. So one judgment may be going on, and the next judgment gets started before that judgment is over. So we can't look at them as saying, okay, well, it's just all in sequential order. And remember, we talked about last week that it's hard to, the way that these are lined out on this, it's hard to put them in a sequence one right after the other of events. Some of them may be going on sequentially or simultaneously. All right? All right. Something else we want to look at here. And that is, fell a great star from heaven. All right? Fell a great star from heaven. Now, what would you think of when you think of a great star falling from heaven? Okay. All right. Well, the Greek word for star here is astari, which literally means star. All right? But most commentators have taken this to mean that it's an asteroid falling to Earth. All right? And that's how they look at it. It's like a shooting star is a meteorite, or so they're looking at this as an asteroid that is falling to Earth. And if you look at an asteroid or a meteorite falling to Earth, that's what it looks like. It looks like a star that is shooting to Earth. Yeah, like a comet. Right? But what else looks like a falling star? Yes. Uh-huh. Probably. I'd have to look it up. I'm not sure, but Well, but he's just saying, he's pointing it to a shooting star or a star that is falling to Earth. Okay. Yeah, he's trying to explain it. The lava, okay. Could be that. Yeah, yeah. But what else looks like? There's something else that looks remarkably like a falling star. As a matter of fact, here's a picture of it right here. Huh? A contrail? No, it's not a. It's not a jet contrail. Well, it's kind of like a jet contrail. It's a ballistic missile. It's a missile. Okay? A missile coming in is going to look like a star falling from heaven. Okay? Yeah, it's coming down from space. It's going to look like and this is a missile that's coming in. It looks like a star that is falling from heaven. And this is going to make a little bit more sense when we get into verse number 11. Okay? Because it's all going to come together and you're going to see how this works out. All right? Now, verse number 10, and the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of water. Verse number 11, and the name of the star is called Wormwood. And we're gonna look at that. That's a very good question. Is that like a bioweapon? We're going to look at that. Okay? And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. Now, the thing we have to look at here, wormwood, right? Wormwood, it's an herb. Yeah. It's a bush. It's an herb. Okay? So we're going to talk about what is wormwood. Well, the Greek word that they're using for wormwood here is absinthos. Right? Now, wormwood is an actual plant. And it was, as a matter of fact, this plant was used and used to be found in alcoholic beverages like vermouth, absinthe. These were in there. Okay, they don't use. They still use a very little bit of wormwood in vermouth right now, but the absinthe has been outlawed since the 30s. Okay, and we're going to see why in just a minute. But wormwood is a very, very, very bitter herb. Right? The problem with it is it also contains a thing called thujone. And a very good question. We're going to talk about that in just a second, too. As a matter of fact, here's a picture of wormwood. This is what wormwood looks like. It's grown mostly in Europe. Find it mostly in Europe, Middle Eastern countries. They used to use it as a medicine, as an herbal medicine. Yeah, because it's an herb. Yeah, it is an hallucinogen, as a matter of fact. It's classified as. There may be. I don't know. There may be some furniture that's made out of wormwood. Okay. But absinthe has been outlawed since the 30s. As a matter of fact, after Prohibition came in, when Prohibition ended, they still outlawed absinthe. Absinthe was a green liquor, all right? Yeah, and Coca-Cola. But it's a very bitter, very, very bitter. But it's like 50% alcohol by weight. Okay, but with a thujone in it, it was very dangerous. All right, because thujone is a neurotoxin. a convulsant, and a hallucinogenic. It comes from, that thujone is in the wormwood. Okay? That is part of the wormwood plant, is thujone. And it's got these properties in it. With that, it affects the central nervous system of people. And it causes restlessness, vomiting, vertigo, tremors, renal damage, convulsions. So all kinds of, it's some pretty nasty stuff. And the thing about it is, thujone is not dilutable with water. You can't dilute it. You can't make it weaker with water. It isn't water soluble. It doesn't mix with water. But it has close to the same type of, or same specific gravity, if you will, of water. So in other words, it doesn't, like with oil, it'll float to the top. Basically the same density as water, yes. What it'll do, like if it's got a lighter density, it'll float to the top. If it's heavier, it'll float to the bottom. You can mix it up in water, and it'll, wherever it mixes up at, that's where it'll stay. It doesn't float. It doesn't drop to the bottom. It doesn't float to the top. It just stays in the water. But it doesn't mix with water, so it doesn't get diluted by water. Okay? It just stays there suspended in it. So it's not dilutable in water. It stays in water. And thujone is toxic in levels as low as 0.3 to 1.0 parts per million. So one part of thujone in a million parts of water is toxic. It can cause all these things. It can cause the vomiting, the vertigo, tremors, renal damage, convulsions, seizures, all of these things it can cause. Yeah. They made the alcohol out of. You can make alcohol out of any plant, just about. Okay? But it's a very powerful psychoactive chemical. Right? So it's there. So how could they use wormwood? How could wormwood be used? Okay? As a poison, bioweapon. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. Watch everybody go. Yeah. But when it comes to biological warfare, most people think when weapons, when you're using weapons, that weapons are meant strictly to kill. Okay? They're not. Okay? Sometimes weapons are just used to incapacitate. Okay? So if you get thujone and you contaminate the water, food or water supplies, which the Bible tells us is going to be the water supplies, you put this in the water supply, a third of the water, then the population is going to, some of them are going to die, yes. A lot of them are going to die. But most of the people that are taking it are going to get sick. So what happens if you're sick? Right? Yeah, you're incapacitated. You have no desire to fight anybody. It's going to take away your will of that person to fight. Okay? It can also, with the contamination, it can also slowly kill by starvation because people can't eat the food. So they're going to starve to death. All right? Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. If you don't have clean water, you're going to die. Well, a third of the water is contaminated, so a big part of their water is gone. Huh? No. It kills you, or it causes you to convulse, or gets really sick. Yeah. But the biggest thing is it's going to break the will of people to defend themselves. Okay? Because when you're feeling like that, you're having seizures, when all this stuff is happening, you're vomiting, convulsing, all of these things, you don't feel like fighting.
When I was having the seizures, it took a lot of energy.
Yeah. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of, of everything that you just don't want to do anything. Yeah. 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 But in the world of warfare, as people are fighting, okay, and that is in the physical world and in the spiritual world as well, the purpose isn't always to kill the body. The purpose is to try to make sure that that person doesn't want to fight anymore. Okay? Yeah. Now, granted, most biological and chemical war agents have been banned by treaties. But we've seen with Iran and all of the Iraq and all of these things, not all of these people are going to follow the treaties. Right? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Countries have always been using chemical warfare, even though chemical warfare has been pretty much, made illegal. All right? There are some chemical agents that are still legal in war, but for the most part, they've been banned. Anthrax is it is a biological weapon. It's a spore. It's kind of like a mold, a spore, and it causes terrible like pneumonia, and it yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. That's not nature anthrax. It's kind of like COVID-19. It didn't come from nature. It was engineered. All right. Yeah, anthrax is made to kill. Now, some of you may be thinking and may be asking, well, wouldn't it be easier to just use nuclear weapons? Well, why would we not want to use nuclear weapons? Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's counterproductive to use nuclear weapons. People are always worried about, they're worried about nuclear apocalypse, that there's going to be nuclear bombs, that North Korea is going to shoot off nuclear weapons at all of these people, and Russia is going to use all these nuclear weapons. Why? It doesn't do any good to use nuclear weapons. When you use a nuclear weapon, it destroys the land, and it makes the land completely unusable. Remember, well, see, but that's the main purpose of taking over a country, is to get the land, get the people. If you have nuclear weapons, you can't do that. It's not going to be inhabitable in any way. Now, yeah, Chernobyl. In Chernobyl, they still cannot use that land. It's still, yeah, and that was in the 70s. 3 Mile Island, where they had that in the United States, it's still uninhabitable. They still can't use that. Okay? Because the half-life of most nuclear half-lives are hundreds, if not thousands, of years. That means just half of it before, it's going to be thousands of years before even half of it goes away. Then another 1,000 years before half of that goes away. So it's completely unusable, right? So what is more a smarter way to do it? Nuclear power plants? Nuclear power plants is to make electricity. Nuclear. If you do nuclear energy right, what nuclear energy does is basically the same thing as a coal or natural gas generating plant. What they're doing is they're using nuclear fusion in order to create steam, which turns a turbine, which creates electricity, which is the same thing that they're doing in coal plants, the same thing they're doing in natural gas plants. They're creating steam. Very clean energy. Yeah. If they don't regulate it correctly, okay, and plus after a while those nuclear rods they lose their effectiveness to be able to use for that, so they have to dispose of those, and they don't have a whole lot of places that they can dispose of it because there again it's got half-lives of thousands of years. So yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, they're burning off unusable stuff out of it that's going through there. But they
What happened at Chernobyl was one of their, it started melting, which caused the
well it starts, but once you start getting a uncontrolled nuclear reaction with that, that's it. That you can't do anything, and no amount of water that you pump into it is going to stop it and is going to do it. Nuclear, they're just outside of Russellville. Yeah, yeah. Arkansas Nuclear 1. Yeah. 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 So the more sensible thing to do, instead of sending nuclear weapons to destroy everything, is to attack the replenishable natural resources. Because when you attack these things, it's temporary. It's not going to be it's not going to be a permanent thing. All right? Natural resources are going to heal themselves. So you may not be able to use those resources for a few years, 5, maybe even 10 years, but eventually you're going to be able to. Unlike with nuclear, you're not going to be able to use those for thousands of years. Yeah, which is a long, long, long time. Yeah. Nuclear weapons are a lot more expensive. So it's not going now that doesn't mean that terrorists and stuff like that may not use nuclear weapons. That's because they just want to kill. But people like North Korea, Russia, some of these places like that are bent on world domination, they're not. Huh? I don't think they're going to drop a I don't think they're going to drop a strategic nuclear bomb, ballistic nuclear bomb on the United States. I don't think that they'll do that. I just don't think. There might be low-yield tactical nuclear devices used on battlefields, but for the most part, the only country that has ever used a nuclear weapon in battle is the United States, and I think that's the only country that ever will have used a nuclear weapon in the world. Yeah, because it's just you just can't use the stuff afterwards. It's counterproductive to use nuclear weapons. Okay? So, something important to note here on this, as we said before, a lot of scholars say that these are going to happen during the Great Tribulation. All right? But as we've seen, these judgments are meant to bring people and bring man to God before he calls the church away. So some of these judgments that we're seeing in the trumpets, we're going to have to endure some of this stuff as Christians. Not because we're going to get left behind, it's because the church isn't being taken yet. It's the rapture hasn't happened. And a lot of commentators, a lot of preachers would try to say, well, all of this stuff, we don't have to worry about any of this stuff because we're going to get taken out of the way before all this stuff happens. No, we're not. We're still going to have to go through great tribulation, not the great tribulation, but we're still going to have to go through great tribulation until that time comes. Yeah. He wants people to turn to God, and he's trying to get people to turn to him. And the thing about it is, people are going to look at these things, and one of two things, or one of three things is going to happen. Either one, people are going to wake up and they're going to say, man, we better turn to God. Because this is bad stuff, so we better turn to God. Okay? That's the first thing that can happen. Second thing that can happen is the people will say, these aren't God. God doesn't exist. These aren't judgments of God. This is just natural stuff. It's climate change. It's all this other stuff. So that we don't have to worry about that. That is just natural thing in terms of events. Okay? Yeah, it's the Martians. And the third thing is people are going to recognize that it's God, but they're going to curse God. They're going to say, I'm mad at you. I hate you for doing this stuff to us. But it's what they're doing that is causing all of this stuff to happen. It's not, God's not doing this. God's not doing this to be mean to people. God's doing this to wake people up. Okay? All right. Let's move on to Revelation chapter 8, the fourth trumpet. Okay. All right. Where am I at? Okay. Look at verse number 12 first. And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of it was blacked out. And the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened. And the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. Okay? So, the fourth trumpet is sounding, and a third of the sun, moon, and stars are darkened. All right? Now, this is not a one-third lessening of light. Yeah. This is not a one-third lessening of the light, but this is total darkness. One-third of the time is going to be total darkness. Now, there are several things that can cause this. All right? Solar eclipse, but those don't last very long. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. That's when everything gets blocked out. And a third of this, now this is going to cause some problems too, because you look at a third of the sun's being blocked out. Okay? This is not a
That's another thing about nuclear weapons is if you shoot one, all that radioactive dust will get into the air, block out the sun.
yeah. Now there's a lot of different things that can cause this to happen. It could be a natural occurrence, like the volcanic eruption that we talked about. Okay? That could be what blocks it out. It could be a divine intervention from God. All right? There's several things that could do it. All right? No, it won't be locusts, because we'll see locusts later on. Yeah. But when we look back on the previous 3 trumpets that have sounded already, all right? Most likely what this is going to be, and this is just, like I said, this is not something that you can actually come right down and say this is what it's going to be, but we can make educated hypothesis of what it's going to be. So based on the first 3 trumpets, this is likely going to be volcanic ash and smoke from the second trumpet that was sounded. Remember, we had that. Because it all spreads out. Now, what would that look like? Well, it just so happens I've got a picture of it. I'm so glad that you asked. Okay? This is a volcano erupting. I don't remember exactly where the volcano was at, but the volcano's been erupting and the ash and everything has gone up. This is the middle of the day. That's the middle of the day. Yeah. 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 So all of this stuff, all of this stuff can happen. The fires.
Well, we know that clouds can cover up. I was thinking about this yesterday when the storm was coming in. I worked in Fort Smith one time at the Waffle House, and it was like morning time, like the sun was out, and then all of a sudden the sky got completely black right before it stormed. Like it was dark. It looked like it was nighttime outside.
Yeah.
In the middle of the day.
Yeah.
Like so, it's possible for the clouds to get that dark.
The clouds can get that dark.
Yeah,
These things.
Like it was so dark.
These things can happen. And if it's blocking out the sun, it's obviously going to block out the stars and the moon and everything else,
Usually, yeah, if it's a cloudy night, you can't see the moon or the stars.
Yeah. So it's
So, yeah.
there are a lot of things that can happen, but most likely it's going to be because, remember, a third of the world is on fire through all this. And then the volcano's coming. So yeah, we're going to, that's why a third of part of this is going to get blocked out. Now, when a third part of all this gets blocked out, what's that going to do? Everything, a lot of stuff's going to die. Now, there's still going to be, you're still going to have it because it's not. Yeah, it's not going to be as. It's not going to be as warm. It's going to be, climate change.
We won't have to worry about the heat going on.
Yeah. We won't have to worry about 102-degree weather. That's for sure. Okay? Yeah. So this is, like I said, there are several things that can cause it. It could be divine intervention. God could step in and cause the earth to slow its rotation a little bit, Actually, if the world stopped rotating, yeah, it would be. But if the world just slowed a little bit, right now at the equator we go about 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. All right? So if it slowed down to 900 miles an hour, it wouldn't, because gravity's really, the spin of the earth doesn't really affect gravity that much. Okay? But the inertia, but if it slowed down gradually, to where it's just like driving in your car. If you're driving in your car and you slam on the brakes, everything goes forward. But if you're driving in your car and you slow down gradually, you don't really notice it that much. Okay? So there again, it could be something like that. I'm not saying that. My guess on it, my educated guess, and my hypothesis is that it's going to be the ash and the smoke from the fires and the volcanoes that have been going on. That's what's going to cause it. Okay? All right. Like I said, it's only a hypothesis.
I mean, just a wildfire in California can affect us.
Oh, yeah. 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 Oh, yeah. Burning all that stuff off, it messes with all kinds of it. Now, verse 13. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels which are yet to sound. Think about that for a second. Okay? Think about that. The first as bad as the first four trumpets were that affected the earth, okay? This is the fourth one. The first four angels, the first ones that affected the earth, okay? The final three are going to infect the inhabitants of the earth. And this angel's flying through, and he's saying, oh, you better watch out. You see what just happened? You know, somebody must have said, I don't think it can get worse. And that angel said, ha ha, hide and watch. This angel's going through saying, watch me. Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because there's some bad stuff fixing to come. Okay? He says, woe to you by reason of the voices of the trumpet of the three angels which are yet to sound. This is not one of the seven angels. This is not one of the seven trumpets. This is another angel that comes through. John's watching this, and this other angel comes through and says, hey, John, whoa, man. You ain't seen nothing yet. Okay? It's fixing to get bad.
That's only the beginning. You know, people in Washington are probably saying, it can't get any worse than this.
Yeah, and it's going to get worse.
It's the worst it can get.
So as bad as the first four were, the angel is announcing the woe of the next three trumpets. And remember, we're still not in Daniel's 70th week yet. We're still here. The Christians are still here. Okay? But understand, this wrath is not directed at the faithful. The wrath that God is bringing out is not directed at us. It's not directed at the faithful. Right? We're going to have to go through some of it. We're going to have to suffer some, but it's not directed at us. Unjust, yeah, exactly. But some, fortunately, some are going to come to God during this time. And that's the good thing. Okay? If there's anything that's good that's going to come of this, is that some people there are going to be people that are going to recognize what's going on, and they're going to come to God because of these judgments that are there. You see, God doesn't send judgments to it doesn't send them to hurt us or as Brother was it, to punish us. He sends these judgments to get your attention. Okay? And he's saying, look, pay attention. There's and there's worse stuff coming. But you can turn. You can turn to me. And things can be better. Right? This doesn't mean that we're going to be spared any of this stuff. But we have the hope of knowing that at the end of this, as we're going through this, we're going to be out of here.
Just said is that he already messed with the earth. Now he's going to mess with. It's going to affect the people.
Now it's going to affect the people. And it's bad enough that the things that have happened with the earth are still going to affect some of the people. But these next ones are directed strictly to the people. So this is it's primarily the non-Christians that it's going to be directed at, but there are Christians that are going to get caught up in it too. Yeah. Right? But even through all of that, there are still going to be millions of people out there that just don't get it. They just won't recognize it. They just don't get it now. As we said, yeah. And then they're gonna be saying it's not my fault. Yeah. It's not my fault. And unfortunately, there's millions going to recognize it. There's millions that are not going to recognize it. And then there's millions that are going to recognize it and reject God anyway. Okay? So, how do we fall into this? Well, that means that we as Christians, we have to do everything we can to bring people to salvation. It's our job, it's our responsibility to try to save as many people as we can from this kind of thing. Okay? To bring them to Christ. So that when the trumpet for us does sound, we can be out of here. And we won't have to go through. Like I said, these things are going to be great tribulation. But as bad as these things are, they're nothing compared to the great tribulation. Yeah, wait till God really starts sending down his wrath. And the Antichrist is thrown into the mix. Okay? So, Lord help them. That's all I can say. All right, next week, we're going to look at the final three trumpets. As I said, the final three trumpets are the ones that are going to be affecting the inhabitants of the world rather than the earth itself. That finished up chapter 8. We'll be going into chapter 9. Okay? So next week we'll do the final three trumpets. Any questions, comments, concerns, amens? Kind of makes you think, doesn't it?